Welcome to YLDP. Today, we have with us Professor Leonard Schlesinger, who is a Baker Foundation professor at the Harvard Business School. He served as the president of Babson College from 2008 to 2013. What we do know about him is that he's a happy grandfather of 4 who has climbed the Kilimanjaro. I was introduced to Professor Schlesinger through Just Start, the book about entrepreneurship that he co-authored. YLDP's foundational principles are based on the ability to start, improve, and develop as we go. Now, I would like to pass it on to our youth leaders and Professor Schlesinger.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. So now we'll go around our youth leaders to introduce ourselves. Hello, my name is Kinoli, and I'm a rising senior at East Brunswick High School.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I'm actually a rising freshman of Case Western Reserve University.
Oh, great.
Hi, I'm Neha, and I'm a rising senior at the Pennington School.
Hey, I'm Suchir, and I'm a rising senior at Bordentown Regional High School. So thank you, youth leaders. Now it's on to Professor Schlesinger.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So as we all know, you're very well versed in the world of business and entrepreneurship. Why did you decide to go into that field?
So literally, I brought up in New York City and in a family that didn't have much money. And so I was always engaging in a variety of different activities to actually put money in my pocket. That continued all the way through high school and into college, where I discovered I needed to put more money into my pocket. And the center of gravity between my personal entrepreneurial activities and my academic activities began to shift more and more towards the entrepreneurial work. And I did get the education, but I would say a more profound education came from trying to run something called Brown Student Agencies when I was an undergrad, and then continuing from there. And so what ended up happening is I got a reasonably rigorous education. I went from undergrad to get an MBA, went to work for a large company, discovered it wasn't as much fun as I thought it would be, went back to school and for a variety of reasons and got a doctorate in business and fell in love with teaching, largely because, as you will discover, what a joy it is to actually engage with people and ask questions and get them answered, which is ultimately what I do all day. And that's a large part of what I've been doing. The ability to be able to ask those questions also turns out to be a great skill for a manager and an executive. And so I've done small entrepreneurial ventures in the restaurant business, then ended up at L Brands Limited Brands, where I was the number 2 person running a $9 billion company, translated that into running a college, and now I'm back talking to you and engaging with students day in and day out. It's just a joy.
Thank you. Recently, we came across a Babson College CreAction video, and I believe it was released in 2010. I know CreAction is labeled as a way of transforming people into entrepreneur thinkers, but there's definitely, I think this concept can also be applicable to life as well. And I was wondering how you think this concept can help people who are maybe not actually considering entrepreneurship.
So 2 things about it. One is, have you ever heard of worse word than CreAction? I actually thought it was great in the moment, and it certainly got attention. But by the time we went from Action Trumps Everything, which was the online manuscript that we produced that outlined the theory of the case, and went to Just Start, we changed CreAction to Act, Learn, Build, i.e. the element of a method. Act, Learn, Build is a mechanism by which people can learn to cope with uncertainty. There's probably no more powerful time for everybody on the face of the earth to be able to experience, act, learn, build than today. Because if they can't act against the uncertainty that pervades the environment, they're just completely paralyzed. So I believe it is a method. Entrepreneurship is a method, just the same way that's a scientific method. It has very simple rules and principles, but those methods are useful for anybody, absolutely anybody, learning to cope with uncertainty. And so your question is a great one. It's not just for business. In fact, one might argue, even if I look at the business model, you know, there's startups in entrepreneurship, there's larger enterprises that are trying to get innovative, there are family enterprises all around the world, there are social enterprises that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems. All of those rely on the entrepreneurial method as a foundation for doing its work. And so I teach this to kids in school. I teach it to women who are returning to the workforce after being out of it for years. I teach it to 75 and 80-year-old people who are looking to actually get energized all over again. And so your question's a good one. It's for everybody, absolutely everybody.
So going back a little bit to Canoli's question, you talked about how you focused in the beginning on somehow getting money into your pocket, and then you worked your way up to a really gratifying career, switching from a large company to teaching. So my question is just, what strategies did you use to be successful? You know, how did you get where you are?
Yeah. So the good news is, I can tell you, I did not have a deliberate and profound strategy. If I took an hour to tell you about my life from step to step to step, I could make it sound incredibly intentional and incredibly thought out, but it would be a lie. I just see things that get me interested, and when I have that itch, I scratch it. And I've been lucky enough to engage with large numbers of people, largely because, like many of you, I have the gift of gab, okay? And so I can engage people in conversations. I can ask good questions. I can get them to be as interested in me as I am in them. And I translate that into being willing to say yes when I'm offered opportunities to do things, as opposed to being paralyzed into thinking strategically whether this is the right thing. So I was a faculty member at the Harvard Business School. I was having a great career. I had just been promoted from assistant to associate professor. Things were going well. And all of a sudden, I got offered this opportunity to be the number 2 person at a restaurant company, Oval Penn. 19 restaurants at the time, small business. And they were suffering from issues that I believed I could be helpful on. So a strategic approach would say, don't give up what you have for something like that. This is absolutely not the way to go. On the other hand, I said, this sounds like fun and I can learn something from it. And I'm not signing up for the rest of my life. So I did it for 3.5 years and it was great. I came back to Harvard for 10 years and it was great. I then went to my alma mater for 2 years and it was lots of fun. And then ended up at Limited for 9 years. So the notion is I tend not to be very strategic and deliberate about thinking about careers, other than making sure it's something you're interested in and making sure that you are answering and working off interesting questions.
When people are starting out in business, for those entrepreneurs who are just taking that very first step, what are some steps that they really need to take in order for their success? What do they need to consider?
Yeah, so that's the magic of the way I think about the entrepreneurial method. Stop thinking about it. Literally, you're saying, "Oh, what do I need to think about?" I need to just go do something. If you have, like I said, I had a niche and scratch it. I'm saying if there's something you're interested in, you need to understand is who you are, who you know, okay, and what you know, and what you can do with those assets to take the first step. So in a sea of uncertainty, my fundamental belief is taking a step is the only way you can gather the data to understand whether you're going to continue to be interested in it and maybe be good at it. So if I tell you to sit home and think, particularly in the crazy environment that we're in today, you'll be still thinking 4 months from now. and you won't have accomplished a single thing. So I'm much more focused on action than planning. Many of you who might end up being entrepreneurs will hear about business plans, and and everybody thinks that you have to teach a course where you spend an entire semester building a business plan. And quite honestly, I think that's all nonsense. And there's absolutely no empirical support that people who build business plans build better businesses. So if you're interested in something, just get started, and you will learn much more powerfully from taking action on the world and getting the feedback that the world is providing to you. So yeah, don't plan. Planning's horribly overrated.
So, we were talking a lot about the current situation we're in. You mentioned a lot of, just get started type tactics. So one of the things that I wanted to ask is, as we're moving into the more online, modern age of business, what are some tips you can give to these, rising entrepreneurs who seek to get a start in their online business or online career, especially considering the modern technological advancements we start to have?
So everybody's busily watching television, hearing how bad it is. And I would tell you, it has never, I mean never, been easier to start a business online than it is today. For any of you, for any of your friends who have the slightest level of skill, all you have to do is find something that somebody wants. Figure out how to patch it online and how to source it and how to get it to them. And then learn as you grow. Now, it turns out, while it's the easiest thing in the world to start a business, it's the hardest thing in the world to scale it. But you need to get started. So from my point of view, again, if you have skills online, you should really be focused on essentially trying to find something that somebody wants. And the easiest way to find out what somebody wants is to put it online and see if they buy it. There's no risk. In fact, the coolest thing about doing it online is it doesn't have to exist. It can be a picture. It can be a story. It can be a million different things where you try to see if anybody is interested in you are and see if they actually order it. Kickstarter is a perfect example of that. Kickstarter is nothing but a portfolio of ideas to get a sense whether people are interested enough in their ideas to actually give them money before a product exists. So if in fact you're looking at this market and this time as an opportunity to get online, now's the time. Now literally is the time. The question really becomes one of how much technical expertise do you have or do you need to have to make this work? And my answer is very simple. The more technical expertise you have, the less you have to share the fruits of your labors with others. If you have no expertise whatsoever, but you're just the kind of the marketing brains, then you better find yourself a technologically oriented partner who you enjoy working with.
So as a follow-up to that, you did mention that, it's super simple to get started and a lot of people can, get started right away. But the problem with that, something that I tend to see is that there's so many people going at it at once. How do you get successful? How do you get your stuff out there to people first before anybody else's, similar niche to whatever business you start, that type?
I think you have to be first. I mean, that's what you said. So why are you saying you have to be first?
Well, so the reason that I mentioned, being first is that I assume that, if you get there first, maybe you start to get that following quicker.
Yeah,
and you have an edge over people.
This thing called first mover advantage, which is increasingly dissipated when the ability to knock somebody off these days is just so easy. I'll give you an example. Have you seen all these new mattress businesses that are out there? Right?
Yeah.
So you had thousands of mattress stores, and now all of a sudden they wrap a mattress up in a box and they send it to you, right? I mean, it's amazing, like Casper or Purple or any of these other businesses. And oh, by the way, Casper was the first. Oh, and Casper went public. Your theory would have them doing very well, wouldn't it? But they're not. Why? Because the second person figured out how to do it better. And the third person figured out how to do it even better than the second person. So what ends up happening now is what we've learned in the literature. There's a great study called The Origin of New Businesses, and the book studies about 2,500 new ventures and where they came from. And it turns out, by the way, that 7/8 of these ventures, 87% of these ventures, are simple elaborations of ideas that exist in the world. Just doing it a little bit better, or doing it for a little bit different market, or doing it for a little bit demographic. So 7/8 of the time, the winners with new ventures are not the first ones there. They're the ones who see something and say, oh, let me play with this. And who are willing to actually, again, take the risk of twisting this around a little bit and seeing if anybody's interested. So the reality is, if you wait to be first, then you have to have an idea that nobody else has had. And having an idea that nobody else has had ever in your entire life is a huge burden. And it's a burden that's likely to have you sitting on your rear end for the rest of your life waiting for the perfect idea.
This is a follow-up question for like something you also said. You said basically your concept is that to create action. Create action, yeah. And kind of just like do it without planning. I think for us as high schoolers and college students, this concept is kind of hard to wrap our minds around, especially since for us, we like, does that mean like, do we not plan our like own school career, what we want to do when we grow up? Like,
I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to sound rude, but it's not intended to be rude, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
How many schools did you look at before you applied to Case Western Reserve?
Probably a good 9 to 11.
You applied to 9 to 11 schools?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you know that Case Western Reserve was the right one?
Oh, that's a good question.
You spent all this time planning. What kind of research did you do? Did you read all these catalogs? Did you talk to friends? How can you possibly know? Oh, and by the way, not only how can you not know, the second part of that is, how many other schools would you have been just as happy in as you are now?
Probably not as much.
You don't think so? So
Yeah.
You're really happy at Case Western, and you believe that you're happy at Case Western because you did this very careful planning to pick the perfect school. Because if you really wanted to plan, there are 2,464-year colleges in the United States alone.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was a college president, and I have people walking across the campus touring all the time. And I still remember what I used to do is the tour stopped and the tour guide said, oh, this is our president. And the parents were there. I don't know if your parents were involved at all in this process, but at Babson, the parents were always involved. It was like they were going to college. And so I used to have 3 rules for them. I'd say, first of all, I'd say hi. Then I'd say to the parents, hey, folks, this is not about you, okay? This is not about you. This is not about where you're going to school. Just lay loose, okay? Number 2, understand your child is going to be happy in any number of schools, some of which they'll get into, some of which they won't get into, but this is not the biggest decision they've made in their lives. Number 3, if they make a mistake, the world hasn't come to an end. Let's just suppose you hated Case Western Reserve. What would you do?
I guess I could transfer.
That's right. And how hard is it to transfer?
Not that hard.
There are no stakes. So we paralyzed ourselves into spending countless number of hours trying to make the perfect decision when we can't possibly make a perfect decision, and the cost of being wrong is just not that great. So all I keep saying to people is like, hey, your kid's going to end up in a good place. Your kid's going to be happy. If your kid's not happy in place 1, they can go to place 2. Stop obsessing about it. Stop over planning. Just live life and get on with it. So I don't mean to pick on you with that one, but I remembered you were a freshman at Case Western, so it was easy for me to play with it.
Yeah. Thank you for your insight.
No,
Okay. Moving on to the next question. We definitely see a lot of like aspiring entrepreneurs that either drop out of college. So there's like a lot of famous examples like Bill Gates and like Steve Jobs, or like completely ignore the college step in general. And I know that you are a college president. You were a college president. So how does a college degree help with the process of succeeding as an entrepreneur?
So there are 3 bits of data to present you. The first is my standard speech about the Bill Gates of the world and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. They didn't drop out of college; they dropped out of Harvard. So I just do that to kind of play. Now, the reality is the what we don't know. Okay, and so this is just a mind game. What we don't know is how extraordinary they would have been if they finished college. All we know is what they did dropping out, but we have no idea what they could have done finishing. And we have tons of people who do extraordinary things. So what ends up happening is people use these ends of one, okay, to make their case, and it doesn't do it very well. Because if you look at the law of large numbers and the number of people who are of a college age, it is absolutely incontrovertible that a college education powerfully impacts the quality of somebody's life. No matter what anybody says, the data, you got it. This is one place where you don't have to go to suppositions. The data is absolutely clear. There's no bigger driver of happiness and economic mobility than a rigorous, good college education, period. Now, that being said, there are all sorts of colleges and all sorts of ways to go, okay? From people who are going to, quote, elite institutions, majoring in the liberal arts, et cetera, to people who are going to schools that actually define themselves primarily in the business of providing a credential and a career. But the reality is, at least at this point, postgraduate education is a prime prerequisite for a successful life in the United States.
Thank you. So I had a real quick question about Babson, which you brought up previously. How did you bring it from, a college that wasn't, that very well known to #1 for the entrepreneurship program, which even now when I'm looking at colleges, I'm personally trying to go into a business school, I'm looking through the rankings and lists, and I see Babson still up there at the top over things like
Still
MIT, Harvard,
Still
still up there.
Good news is because MIT and Harvard don't have undergraduate majors in entrepreneurship, but nobody knows that. So there are 2 parts to that question, and I answer it both ways. It is not to say that Babson is anywhere near as good as Harvard and MIT. It just illustrates one thing we know about strategy and organizational life, that the focused player wins every time. All we do is business, and within business, most of what we do is entrepreneurship. So if we can't win in that space, we have nothing else to sell. And Harvard's great at all sorts of things. MIT is great at all sorts of things. Lots of universities great at all sorts of things that are more generalist. But the notion of the power of focus is a big deal. Now, the reality is I don't want to take credit for making Babson #1. Babson was #1 when I got there. The reality of what I did was actually market it in a more coherent way so that more people were excited about going there. Because the reality is that even though it was #1, we were losing a ton of money before I got there. And we hadn't figured out how to monetize it into a financial model for the school that worked. So the goal was dramatically increasing the reputational capital of the school, increasing the number of applications, increasing the admit rate, and parlaying that all into increases in reputational capital, so that the application pool becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what you need to understand Yeah, I'm going to tell you. The rankings are all BS, okay? Be very clear, okay? They're all BS. If you look at the business school rankings for US News and World Report, they send it out to a bunch of deans of other business schools who've not been on your campus in decades or at all. And it is purely reputational capital. Now, the reality is, if you're a college president, that reputational capital has value in terms of applications and stuff like that. But don't confuse what it means to me as being something powerful for you. Okay, and by the way, I can find you a source that can make almost any school you're interested in #1 at something you care about. I mean, the variations in the rankings for business schools are so great. What you have to find is there's a pool of really good schools. There's a pool of schools where you believe you're in the domain, given your background and your standardized test scores and your academic success undergrad, you could play at and go to, and just take it from there. It's just not. It's not that magical, and the rankings just don't tell you. They don't tell you anywhere near as much as it's hard to do today, but as a day on campus, telling me what you feel like. How do you feel after spending a day there? I have 3 daughters, and they all went to very different colleges. And I still remember, I was the parent who was going to go with them to all of the schools these days. You went to visit all these places, and it was great. And I'd sit with one, and we're walking down the street. I still remember quite vividly. We were up at Williams College up in Williamstown, Mass. And I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. And so here I am thinking, wow, if I was going to college, I'd want to go here now, right? And I'm talking to my daughter, and I said, so, like, what do you think, Katie? Isn't this amazing? And as she looks at me, she goes, I'm not feeling the vibe. I said, excuse me? What does that mean? She goes, I don't know. I'm just not feeling the vibe. And I said, well, does that mean you want to kind of turn around from the tour and go home? She goes, yeah, that probably makes sense. And we'd just driven 3.5 hours to this place, stayed in a hotel overnight, had breakfast. We're all excited about it. We're down 2 blocks and she's not feeling the vibe, right? The smartest thing I ever did was respect it, right? Smartest thing I ever did was respect it. They all ended up at radically different schools. They had radically different experiences, but they believed they were able to play a major role in deciding how they were going to live their lives. And quite honestly, the variations in the schools were not great enough for me to put my thumb on the scale and say, no, it's this, not that.
So for me?
Yeah.
Well,
you've gone through, I smashed the ratings. What are you going to do now?
Well, if it was the case of, ratings don't matter, I'd be looking at location. So, I'm on the East Coast, and I want to stay close to, my family a little more. So personally, I'm trying to look for, an East Coast school. But now that we're in this situation, we can't really go visit. So I might have to, look for virtual tours or some sort of thing like that.
Virtual tours will help. But the key things you need to understand about how you'd feel emotionally: city or rural, size. And then the thing I always tell people to do is go find the gossip sites, which are far better than the ones the school pays. Go find the gossip sites so you can understand about the quality of instruction. So what are people saying about their teachers? The bigger the school, the more time you're going to spend with doctoral students masquerading as faculty. The thing that was exciting about Babson, I can say, all of you are going to be taught by faculty. There are no doctoral students, no grad program. It was all faculty. And if what you're caring about are small classes and faculty, that narrows the universe a great deal. The final thing, obviously, for you, if you're looking at business, I also assume at some point you're interested in money, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the best indicator the best indicator of percentage of graduates who get a job within 6 months of graduation, their starting pay, and then you look at the same pay statistics 5, 10, 15 years out. So it gives you a sense of not only are they attractive at the time they graduate, but do they have skills that make them successful in the enterprises they're looking for? That's a secret. Don't tell anybody.
Well, one more thing relating to that topic is you mentioned the power that the reputation of a college has. So when you graduate from that certain college, how much power does the degree from that college hold when you go look for job options or career paths?
So I have to be careful about how I say it, given that I've been a professor at Harvard for years. It's a very good school, okay? It's a very good school. The quality of the teaching is sublime, okay? The great power is a network of alumni who will do anything for you. And we've wired up that alumni in a very powerful way. So the ability to engage directly with alumni, to get help in the job market, is an essential precondition to looking at these schools. So it means in some respects, you need to have enough scale, okay, to have a graduate pool that's great. You need to have a school that's really good at organizing its alumni, and where there's a demonstrably loyal alumni group. But what I'm saying is you're not only graduating from college, but you're graduating into a network, and the quality of that network will define in large part how easy it will be for you to traverse life for the next several years after that.
Thank you.
I have one. All set. It's a powerful network. The most significant people in Cleveland are there.
Yeah.
But there's a large school, large numbers of graduates, loyal alumni. It's got it all. Yeah.
I think for me, when I chose my college, like I wanna like my hope and dream is to like end up becoming a family medicine doctor. So like the fact that Case Western has a lot of hospitals nearby in the university circle is really helpful when it comes to volunteering.
Yeah, and great hospitals too.
Yeah.
The great hospitals, great medical school. So there obviously is an example of, I wouldn't call it planning. I would say, hey, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Where should I be? And what are some of the elements of the schools and the markets I go to school in that should matter? Right? Now, you could probably get 30 cities that are just as attractive as Cleveland in that regard. But the reality is you just illustrated a much better set of principles for thinking about where you want to go to school than the books that give you the ranking.
That's true.
So I got one more question. So when we think about coming out of college for entrepreneurship, people have the idea of, okay, let's start a business. Let's get let's start something new. At what age is it appropriate to leave that typical, the corporate 9-to-5 job and go take that risk and completely start a new business?
How about 5, 6, 7 years old? So years ago, I ran a program in the Boston market. Where on the second or third Saturday in May, we launched 1,500 lemonade stands all around the city. And we had an 8-week curriculum in the schools and the Ys and the churches and the synagogues and the youth centers to actually get people to understand the math and the process of being able to develop a recipe of lemonade that people would like, how to build a stand, where to put the stand, all of the fundamental elements. And just like this session here, I'd drive around that Saturday and I'd go to as many stands as I could. And the one thing I had to get people to do consistently was to stop hiding behind their stand and get out and talk to people, all right? There'd be a stand next to a bus stop, and people would be getting off the bus, and the people behind the lemonade stand would be ignoring them. They'd be focusing on their lemonade. I said, no, 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 you're going with me to the bus, okay? Just like Cecilia does with you. I would drag people out on the corner, and I would make them ask people if they wanted lemonade. Because if they don't get it out of their system, and if they don't have a victory at some point early in the process, they will hide and never speak up. And so I don't think age matters a heck of a lot in terms of getting started and figuring this stuff out. The reality is, people say entrepreneurship is a young person's game. It turns out that's complete BS. That the average age of a successful entrepreneur in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, based on some MIT research a couple years ago, take a guess. What do you think it is?
50 to 60.
Yeah, 51 years old. 51 years old. So much for this is a young person's game. So the reality is, it's for everybody and it's for anybody. So you can do it when you're young, you can do it when you're old. It's different audience, different scale, different economics. But all I'm asking you to do is to not step back, but to step forward, to not shut up, but to speak, okay? And to understand, the more you practice it, the better you will get. It's just that simple.
Yeah, I've seen results with that style of, going forward. I myself, through quarantine, I had a lot of free time, so I started like a small little music company thing. So I'm putting out music, and I just have it there. So for a while, we didn't really have any people come to it. We didn't get people to visit our web store. So we started a social media page, and then people just started, we got people to follow. We went to artists and asked them to, purchase stuff, and we, talked to them through that. And so we got bigger thanks to that. So I can see that.
What you managed to do, see, you kept that a secret in the front end when you interviewed me. You just illustrated exactly what you asked me about. When I talked about there's no better time to start a business online. Just go do it, right? You just said, if I had this stuff, it was wonderful. If I don't tell people about it, they're not going to buy it.
Right.
That's a great point.
I think the practicing ties perfectly into what I'm going to say next, because as you know, YLDP is a public speaking organization. So back when I was in middle school, my parents told me to get in the car, and they dropped me off at this organization. And they said, "You're here to learn public speaking." And on that first day, Miss Jackson put me on the spot and made me introduce myself. And obviously it worked, because now I'm a youth leader. But I just wanted to ask, what role does public speaking play in business and leadership? Because I know it's an important skill, but like how far does it take you?
The first thing we do at Babson College, so there's a course called the Fundamentals of Management and Entrepreneurship, which is a course that's required for all first-year students. Where in small groups, they actually have to start a business. So it takes them through the entire cycle of starting the business. Within 1 week of being in college, they have to stand up and do a rocket pitch. And they are panic struck, most of them. Just panicked. I can't do it. I can't do it. Well, the bottom line is, if you keep telling yourself you can't do it, you won't be able to do it. Just get up and do it. It's not going to be magic. It's not going to be magnificent, but someone cares about you and is watching you and is going to give you feedback and is going to give you coaching, and you're going to get better. And what you're going to understand is your ability to interact with people verbally, right, is just, it's a pathway to so many different opportunities. I would suggest, in some respects, now partially it's because I spent most of my life as an academic in front of people talking, but I'm a much better talker than I am a smart person, okay? And literally my ability to engage with all sorts of communities in all sorts of ways, to tell a joke, to scream, to tell a story, to engage people in a conversation, has been the most significant foundation of whatever success I've had in my life. Absolutely. And, and part of it, I lucked out. I lived in a family where if you didn't speak up, right, you couldn't be heard over all of the noise. I had to do it at the family level. But no, what you are so lucky to be doing this, and as long as you understand it's not work, okay, it really is critical skill development. Hopefully, you'll be able to give this gift to someone else as it goes forward.
So you talk about like acting in the moment. You don't want to take a step back and like plan out everything. So a lot of that, when you're acting, like you're putting out all those actions, a lot of luck comes into play, whether it be in life or school or whatever. How does luck play into the business world in particular?
Yeah. So I think it was my second year at Babson. I gave my commencement speech about being lucky, right? And the reality is being lucky using the entrepreneurial method is very simple. We just started playing baseball the other day. Okay, who knows how long it will last? But the metaphor I use is the more at-bats you get, the more likely you're going to get a hit. Okay? And so what the method is all about is about getting more at-bats. Okay? So the more tries you get in life, the more likely you're actually going to get something. Because remember, CreAction is about act, learn, build. Okay? Act on, learn from what you've done, and build on it and take the next step. And so as long as this continuous loop of acting and learning and building, the probability of you being successful is going to increase exponentially. And secondly, early on, if you're just acting, you discover the conversation that we had, Kathy and I had, about transferring if it wasn't the right decision. What seemed, before school as the most important decision in her life, in the space of 3 minutes, I could actually make it appear to be not very important at all. So failure is not the biggest deal in the world. It just gets you one step closer to having a great success. And I always say failure means that you've learned something that basically nobody else knows.
So we mentioned success throughout a lot of the interview. I wanted to know what dictates success. What's your definition of success?
It all depends how you keep score. Literally, everybody keeps score in different ways. There's a traditional method where people keep score in terms of, where are you in the hierarchy? How much power do you have? How much money do you have? That's a foundation for a lot of people's stories. I've been very lucky. I've had senior roles in big companies. I've made a lot of money in my life. And I define success, simply put, as I've got a family that's healthy and happy. I've got kids and grandchildren that are great. And we get to spend a lot of time together. That's number one. Number two, I get to spend most of my days with incredibly smart people who want to change the world. And I get to ask them questions, and I get to push them pretty hard. And they pay for it, right? And it's amazing how much fun that is. So every one of us is going to define success in different ways, and we're going to define success in different ways at different stages of one's life. I'm 68 years old. I'm not seeking anything. Okay? I'm not looking for what's next. I'm happy with what is. I teach a course now in leadership and happiness, and I try to get people to understand all of the downsides of keeping score around happiness in very traditional ways. All we know is no matter how much money you have, you want 40% more, right? We know that, okay? Psychologically, we know that. We also know the more emphasis you put on what you have as the way to keep score, okay, as opposed to what you need, the more you'll find yourself striving to do things that are spectacularly unhealthful. So I look at life satisfaction as a function of, essentially what you have over what you want, okay? And everybody keeps trying to make what you have higher. And I say, like, How about making what you want less? Right? Yeah, so it turns out that if you can actually, and you know, the Buddhist religion is the perfect example of focusing on the bottom of that equation. The Dalai Lama, perfect example of focusing on that. But I'd ask you at some point, maybe you don't need anything you want. You know, just it's about what you want and about what you have, and look at that as being in relationships as you think about being happy going forward.
So this was a delightful conversation. It was really amazing. And I had to come in because I am processing this idea of how do I introduce well-being or the concepts and topics of well-being to the children, because I feel they are still too young for me to even bring that forward. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, send me another email. I'll send you a set of slides the way I talk about it. And literally the simplest way I try to do about around well-being is with haves and wants. Right? Then the other way I do it in business school is because they love to hear business-oriented words. I talk about the portfolio model of happiness. Right? So the portfolio model of happiness is friends, finance, right? Family, and faith.
Okay.
And friends dwarf everything.
Okay.
Absolutely dwarfs everything in terms of distortion. If you look at people who actually lead a very healthy, long life, it is almost entirely rooted in their ability to demonstrate deep friendships.
So whatever we are doing within YLDP, I think it's working. Today we've made a new friend.
That's great.
Thank you so much to all of our youth leaders and Professor Schlesinger.
Well, this was enormous fun. I hope it was useful for you. You are all really good interviewers. You had great presence. Your questions were super. And I look forward to hearing great things. Let me know when you get your MD degree so I can come to Cleveland and have an exam.
Okay.
That's
Any last questions before we stop?
it was one.
I've got everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me as well. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
for-
you.
You too.
Nice to meet all of you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you
Nice to
too.
meet you too.